So think about the 4 C's of cloud security. Everybody talks about it, right? Cloud, cluster, container, code.
Yep.
Right? So CDR is just one. It's just the cloud. Cluster, KDR, Kubernetes detection and response. Container, eBPF-based process analysis. And code or application, I think that's ADR, application detection and response. Basically, understanding all of the different layers that an attacker might be able to utilize in order to penetrate your organization.
If you're a cloud security person who's looking at Kubernetes, you're probably missing a blind spot that is very obvious. I'm at Kubecon today and I'm talking to Shauli Rozen. We spoke about Kubernetes runtime security. That's right. The same way a lot of us try and secure our applications that are hosted in cloud. These days, most applications that are built on AI or any of the newer projects seems to be a lot more on Kubernetes. In this conversation, we spoke about the space of CADR, CADR. Yes, I know, it's another acronym. It's not official yet, but I think we would like it to be official. So we spoke about CADR, how different it is to a CSPM, and why the way CSPM or even as much as CNAP may be missing something here when they talk about Kubernetes security, and why runtime security for Kubernetes is going to be a bit different than you may believe with the CNAP. All that and a lot more in this conversation with Shauli Rozen from ARMO Security. And as always, if you're listening or watching a Cloud Security Podcast episode for a second or third time, I would really appreciate if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a follow. If you're watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn, definitely follow, subscribe, because that would truly help support the work we're doing over here. I hope you enjoy this episode with Shauli and get to learn more about runtime security in Kubernetes, the cloud native way. I'll talk to you soon. Welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast. Today we're talking about CADR, and to talk about this, hey man, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Could you tell us a bit about yourself and your professional career and what led you to start a company?
So it's been a while. I have a long history behind me, but I'm an engineer by profession. Turned more into the management and business roles when I did my MBA here in the United States, actually. And then went back to Israel, worked in a few technology startups. And then I met Ben, my co-founder, and he had this great idea of runtime security for Kubernetes. And we started dating, right? And we had quite a bit of dating, got to know each other. The technology that he had in mind was amazing. And I thought, yeah, let's make the jump after being an executive in a few startups and do one of my own.
And so Kubescape was one of the things that came out of that as well, which is an open source project in CNCF.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit about what that project is and where do people end up using it?
Yeah, so Kubescape is, honestly, in the beginning was almost like a side effect. So Ben, came up with this idea of runtime security for Kubernetes, which is based on detailed data on the application behavior. And it was very advanced, but it was also 2019, 2020. We would go to companies and we present that. And the feedback was, this is amazing, but we are facing much more basic problems. We want to know basic Kubernetes hygiene. We want to scan for vulnerabilities. We want to scan for misconfigurations. Like, we're really in our basics right now.
Yeah.
So we thought, hey, let's take out an open source that does exactly that.
Yeah.
And that's where Kubescape came up. Ben came up with it. We launched it in the beginning. It was just scanning for the NSA and CISA guidance for hardening of Kubernetes. It just came up, I think it was 2020 or 2021.
Yeah.
And Kubescape was the first tool that kind of took your cluster and scanned against that.
Oh, so CIS benchmarks and...
Yeah, CIS, NSA, all of those benchmarks. And then we took off really fast.
Yep.
Today it has like over 10,000 stars in GitHubs. Something like 30K companies already using it in their environments. And that's why we decided to make our enterprise product also part of that. So we took that runtime information and that runtime protection data, we latched it on, and now the ARMO platform is basically combining all of those together.
How would you describe runtime? And the reason I ask this is because every time I try and talk about Kubernetes security, people talk about, oh, I have CNAP, I have CSPM, throw all these acronyms. For people who probably, just to give them a sense of why, to your point, Kubescape was that first layer for posture management, if I could use that word for, if you're benchmarking right, that I would think is where CSPM normally kind of ends. Yeah. How would you describe runtime security for people who probably haven't worked in that Kubernetes space quite a lot? How would you describe that?
So I think there is the business aspect of it and the technology aspect of it. Technology-wise, runtime is what is actually happening in your cluster. So taking data from cloud logs, taking data from eBPF, which is now the most prevalent and the most detailed data that you can get. What system calls are running in my environment, what code is running, what networking events, what file access events are happening. And that is runtime data. That is data that is happening in runtime. It's not yet runtime security, it's just data, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost like Datadog, monitoring,
Yeah.
OpenTelemetry agent.
Yep.
All of those are looking at runtime data.
Yeah.
It's runtime data. Now, what I believe you can do with this runtime data is you can take it back into CSPM. You can take it back into KSPM and use it to prioritize and create remediations for those elements. Most of the CSPM tools or KSPM tools will tell you, hey, here's an application which is overprivileged, right?
Yep.
But really what they're saying is it might be overprivileged because there might be the case that this is the privilege that this application needs.
Yep.
You just don't know unless you have that data.
Yep.
So we take that data, we compare it with best practices and say, hey, this application, here's a new configuration to it that will actually work with what's happening in runtime. It will not break the application, but it will be more secure. So that layer of runtime information on top of all of the CSPM data and posture data creates much better prioritization and gives you remediation advice. Having said that, I think real runtime security is preventing attacks, identifying, detecting, and responding to attacks. And if CSPM and KSPM was like the table stakes, I think in 2021, it was like the glory child of 2021. Everybody needed it. I completely understand that. But I think by today, quite honestly, CSPM is a commodity. Okay, yeah, I take API, I take cloud APIs, I check them against rules, here you go. Pretty much a commodity. And I think the next level and where the real battle of innovation is going to be is who can use the data to detect and respond to actual attacks and actual threats in your environments.
A lot of people think of runtime security as application security as well sometimes. And sometimes we'll put CDR in there as well.
Yes.
So where does all of that fit into in this conversation?
To be honest, I think 2025 and right now is the time where companies and analysts as well are trying to define this space, right? Gartner came up with CNAP, which in my mind basically says everything under the sun. CNAP, okay. Now, 95% of CNAPs today, it's a glorified CSPM. They take a CSPM and they call it CNAP, and here we go. I think the biggest part of protection is actually runtime protection. And here, I specifically have a very structured approach to how it looks like. And I think it's about what data that you use for the detection, and can you build a full story out of it. CDR, which is a term that is currently talked about quite a bit, is cloud detection and response. In my mind, that translates to taking cloud logs, cloud data, and detecting issues with them and responding to them. That's cloud detection and response. Just like EDR is taking endpoint data and identifying issues. Unfortunately, CDR is a very small part. It's also not real time. You're using logs and it takes 15 minutes for the legs together. But there is also a lot of things happening in the clusters, and eBPF is a big part of that. There are a lot of eBPF projects now. Kubescape is a big part of that as well. And I believe you need a combined approach. So I'll take a step back. So think about the 4 C's of cloud security. Everybody talks about it, right? Cloud, cluster, container, code. So CDR is just one. It's just the cloud. Cluster, KDR, Kubernetes detection and response. Container, eBPF-based process analysis. And code or application, I think that's ADR, application detection and response. Basically, understanding all of the different layers that an attacker might be able to utilize in order to penetrate your organization.
It actually goes back to what you were saying, because at the end goal for a security team is to block a malicious attack. It doesn't matter if it's on cloud, container, Kubernetes. And I think, because you mentioned ADR as well, what is ADR?
So ADR in my mind is application detection response. What is that? It's basically looking at application events, usually using eBPF, what functions are being called, what network activity is happening, and identifying anomalies or malicious activity there. Now, if you took ADR and you take KDR and you take CDR and you bring them together into a single platform, that's what I define as CADR or CADR or whatever they want to call it. But regardless of how they call it, CADR is basically the only way that you can create what we like to call in ARMO explainability. It's the only place where you can say, okay, this is what happened in the application, this is what happens in the cluster, this is what happened in the cloud, and the combinations of these events, that's the attack, right? That's the story that we can tell. And I think many of the companies out there are currently missing this full story.
Interesting. And this is totally fine if you don't want to answer this question. I'm curious. There is ASPM, and then there is also the world of DAST. All that's where do you think that fit in? Because as you said that, the moment an application security person hears, isn't that DAST? And
yes and no.
okay.
So the way I separate the world, and I think also I start to see it also in organizations, is there are like 4 quadrants or something like that. So think of it this way. There's the left side, my code, my CI/CD.
Yep.
That's where ASPM fits in.
Yep.
Scanning for vulnerabilities. That's also where SAST fits in. Sneak, those type of companies.
Yep.
And in that layer, on the left-hand side, this is for me posture. Scanning for vulnerabilities is posture. Now, there is application posture, Sneak. There is cloud posture, Wiz and CSPM. Those 2, in my mind, are converging. That's also why Wiz launched Wiz Code, I think.
That's right.
Because in my mind, posture is posture. It's going to be one team, infrastructure security, application security. That's one team trying to make sure that we are resilient as possible. All of the vulnerabilities are fixed. All of these configurations are fixed.
Yeah.
And there is the right-hand side where you need to respond to attacks that are happening in runtime. This is more of security operation, incident response team. And they also, in my mind, will converge between application security and cloud security because they need to see all of the events together. So on that front, you mentioned, DAST and RASP. I do believe that ADR, like that part of CADR, is the next generation of RASP and DAST. And actually, I think fixes much of the illness of RASP. The industry suffered from RASP quite a bit. So eBPF is a very, I would say, elegant way to be less intrusive, use kernel observability to do things which are very much similar to RASP, but you can do it in a much more scalable way.
I keep going back to how you described in the beginning, which is basically, as security people, most of us don't really care if it's on Kubernetes or cloud, whichever, multi-cloud, whatever. I care about the fact that if there is a malicious attack potential, I have identified it, I have responded to it, I've closed it. And I love the quadrant thing that you called out to the left and right as well. In your mind, at the moment, people that you're looking, or I guess I imagine a lot of people who are not even at Kubecon and people who may not be that familiar with the Kubernetes landscape. What is eBPF and how prolific is Kubernetes in usage? Because to your point, you have Kubescape, you're going into the whole CADR space as well. Is the usage that you see across your customer base primarily Kubernetes? And like now we are in this world of AI as well. Is that where do you feel where we're going? Because I imagine people who are listening to this who are leaders planning in 2025, should they consider a Kubernetes thing, like an eBPF approach in there? So first question, where do you see the usage of Kubernetes go from here?
So Kubernetes, in my mind, is only been growing. We started with Kubernetes. Today, we're not only focused on Kubernetes. We go up into the cloud and into non-Kubernetes workloads.
Okay.
But still, 90% of our customers are Kubernetes-based. And Kubernetes, I think 2022 was the year where Kubernetes started to go into production in really a massive way. And today it is so prevalent. Almost every company we speak to is mostly, they will still have non-Kubernetes workloads, but the move to Kubernetes is super, super significant. Having said that, companies don't think about security as Kubernetes security. Think about it as security, right? They might be running their application on security, so it's on Kubernetes. So their application security is also Kubernetes security, just part of it. And cloud security, Kubernetes security is just part of cloud security. People don't think about dedicated Kubernetes security solutions. And maybe they don't need to, but in some cases, we've encountered companies where, 100% of the workloads are running on Kubernetes. Everything is running on Kubernetes. It's running on Kubernetes in the cloud. And now they issue an RFP. What is the RFP for? Cloud security.
Okay.
Because they don't think about it, even though they think about it as part of that environment.
Right, and that's where I think to your point, the CNAP category kind of becomes a default. I guess there's a CNAP which does everything.
Exactly.
So I'm glad you called out the fact that Kubernetes in cloud is still classified as cloud security as well, because I think we started covering Kubernetes security on Cloud Security Podcast about 3-4 years ago. At that point, people were like, why are you covering Kubernetes? And this is almost 2022, 2023, when we started seeing it, we spoke to Kelsey Hightower. He was talking, hey man, this is going to be like that next big thing, blah, blah. And now today, to your point, there is still a segment of the market that believes that Kubernetes security is the same as cloud security because of the CNAP conversation that we just had as well.
Yes, all I'll say about that is, one, they're right. They need to secure their cloud.
Yeah.
That's what they're thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Where they might be confused is when you choose a vendor, for example, or when you think about the functionality that you need.
Yeah.
Doing cloud security without having detailed Kubernetes knowledge and experience and a product that is very knowledgeable in Kubernetes, it's like doing EDR without knowing what kernel version you are running or without awareness to the underlying infrastructure. And that's why I do believe Kubernetes security is part of cloud security.
Yeah.
But if you just put cloud security, you just put CSPM, okay, and you don't have someone who really knows what's going on in your Kubernetes, it's a huge blind spot. It's just an enormous blind spot.
And to talking about blind spots, how does one notice or understand if the CSPM they're using right now has the blind spot? Are there any specific examples that come to mind in the way natively you'll do Kubernetes security versus how a CSPM, oh yeah, we do coverage of Kubernetes, don't worry about that.
Yeah, so, what you'll see very often is that you will see a few checks and you'll see like we started, right? You will see some very
CIS
basic
benchmark.
CIS benchmarks. You will see NSA. Can they generate for you the right network policy? Can they know second profiles for every one of your workloads? Do they have the intimacy of what's happening? I think eBPF is a huge part of Kubernetes security and as such also part of cloud security.
Yeah.
90% of the CSPM is not reliant on that data. It is just, it's basically missing.
So people who are in leadership positions planning for their 2025 strategy, like building their roadmap, obviously to what you said and what we are seeing as well, a lot more people are building Kubernetes in cloud. What should that roadmap include in terms of things that would help them cover for the malicious attacks that we were talking about that are runtime and potential? I guess they obviously have to think about the overall picture when you work on a roadmap. So what do you think they should think about including in their roadmap for 2025?
So I think CADR, as I said, is going to be a term. It's going to be a term. We as a company, quite honestly, are trying to lead that discussion and make sure that it is a category. We're not alone there. We have other companies who are with us in this journey. And I think it's a very important journey. It's a journey of taking cloud security from posture to runtime and to actually detecting and preventing and responding to attacks. Now, my advice to CISOs is don't drink the platformization Kool-Aid. Okay, there are some companies in the market preaching platformization, but what they really are doing is bundling. Okay, it's not really platformization. They just sell you a bunch of products under the same UI. You need to switch the UI with a drop down to move from one to another. There's no synergies. I'm biased, of course, but I think if there is a place for a best of breed, it's this place. You can't take your CSPM provider and say, yeah, for sure, they have an eBPF agent. Yeah, let's take that. It's not the same skill set. These are kernel developers, people who know deeply the inside and outside of the kernel. CSPM is more about data manipulation, which is an amazing challenge, but I think it's solved by now.
To add another layer to this as well, the CSPM and the way people plan for roadmap, they might be looking at CSPM. So if the CSPM provider is using eBPF, but it's not native, to your point, it's a capability that has been added later, maybe something to be questioning them at that point in time for Kubernetes.
What I would say is, first of all, my approach to life is question everything.
Yeah, it's not a bad start.
So someone sells you something, you always need to question. Also question me.
Yeah.
And what's the solution to solve that? Test. Okay? You believe the eBPF agent of your current CSPM provider is good enough? Try it out against us. Try it out against some of our competitors. Throw some advanced attacks into it. Even put it out and don't throw attacks and see what's happening. And I can tell you that in one case, you'll get a ton of false positives. It will alert you on all kinds of rules because the specificity and the knowledge is not really there. And then in the attacks part, we will just identify more attacks. So what I say is put a criteria for you and then put us to the win and see who does it better.
We've been talking about the CADR space. At what stage a company would need a CADR? I don't imagine everyone needs a CADR in the beginning. So people who are, I guess, small to medium-sized businesses who are trying to figure out one cloud provider, fully into it, just doing Kubernetes versus someone which is an enterprise that is multi-cloud, on-premise, hybrid, throw all the acronyms in there as well. Yeah. At what stage do you feel people are mature enough to have a CADR? Is it in the beginning stage itself, or is it rather in the later stages when you're a lot more bigger?
So I think one kind of runtime protection, detection, response, or another you need from the get-go. Okay, and you can use open source. Kubescape, our open source, you can use it. The non-enterprise version of it will give you, I would say, a pretty basic coverage of runtime security. Will send you alerts when an unexpected process is running. I would say it would cover 80% of a small organization needs.
Yeah.
There are also other like Falco,
Yep.
right? So you can use those. After that, the next level in my mind within CADR would be ADR. I
Okay.
would say that having the eBPF, because that's the last line of defense, that's more real time. I think that would be the next level.
Yeah.
And larger organizations should go for the full CADR in order to get that explainability.
Yeah.
Also because they will have many more events. So when you have more events, you need to do that correlation to actually reduce them. The idea is to reduce this.
Actually, that's a good point because you need the volume to validate the data. If you don't have enough volume, then do you really need to buy a Ferrari when a Toyota can do the job as well? Exactly. Fair. And for people who are in the cloud security space, so probably to your point, have been given the challenge of, hey, you do cloud security, there's Kubernetes security in there as well. How should they look at filling the gap? Because the security roadmap that a lot of CISOs or security leaders would build is built on the fact that, oh, okay, so Shauli just mentioned that, hey, I should have eBPF native capabilities because that's what makes Kubernetes. How are you seeing the cloud security community grow into that Kubernetes security gap that is left at the moment?
On one hand, I see more and more companies using the best of breed approach. So they have the CSPM, but they have a very large Kubernetes footprint, and they will use a company like us or other company for the Kubernetes security.
Yep.
But I think the bigger move is not from cloud to Kubernetes, is from posture to runtime. And when you do that, where eBPF is becoming much more prevalent and much more strong, basically.
And would you say, in terms of where we're going with this, the logging part, because a lot of the challenges in the cloud security space used to be around that, hey, I found a vulnerability, I don't know, insert CSPM provider has given me 10,000 vulnerabilities. Okay, fine, half of them are false positive. The ones that I find, I have sent this log to someone. Usually in the initial stages, it's usually the cloud security person, then it matures to SOC people. What happens with the Kubernetes security logs? Who's looking after that in an organization you're speaking to?
So that's a big mess, right? In many cases, nobody knows. And the Kubernetes logs usually end up at the DevOps or the platform team ends. That's what really is happening. And what we are trying to do as a provider is to get access to that also for the security team. And it's also a bit of education, right? Because security teams sometimes don't think about Kubernetes events as security events.
Yeah.
So that's a big gap that we are now filling up.
Interesting, because, and this is a good point to call out as well, because I think I was having a conversation on an advisory call, because we've been doing some work on educating people on Kubernetes security. There's certain terminologies, like a CNAP provider may show you that, hey, by the way, it looks like you have 5 namespaces, prod, dev, test, and what the hell is the namespace?
Exactly.
Because like even that, sometimes just getting the foundational layer sometimes is missing. Is that why it goes to the platform team? Because they have the understanding of what namespace is.
Yeah, and they are also the people who will know how to fix things. You have a service account which is mounted on a pod, and it's a risky situation to remove that. The DevOps team, the platform teams are the ones that are going to do that. You need to map a new volume. It's all done by the DevOps team. So I think connecting security teams and enabling them to send the right data to the DevOps team is the key thing there.
Obviously, you guys are trying to talk about runtime security in 2019, 2020. And now that we have 2024 now, we spoke about what it is today with the CADR space coming up as well. Where do you see this kind of go as you see more people try and talk about what's the Kubernetes challenge or cloud challenge? And it could be the same thing that you said earlier, that the CADR space is coming up. Where do you see the future go with this in the Kubernetes security space at the moment in terms of adoption of more Kubernetes, more cloud? Is security going towards CADR? Or is it going to be more, hey, I'm going to start with my CDR, add ADR, and then CADR?
I think CADR will come as a category and will not be broken down. There is a certain situation where I can see that the CDR part is being covered by the CSPM companies because they have that capability of collecting a lot of data. They collect the API data, so now they collect also the logs. What they lack usually is eBPF kernel type capabilities. So I do see some places. In general, I think it's going to be CSPM and CADR. That's in general. But I do see cases where the CDR part of CADR will still be under the CSPM. I'll give you an example, okay? We are now working with a huge customer, and they asked us to send our ADR logs into the CSPM
Okay.
because they chose that as the place that collects all of the data.
Yeah.
So they saw that our agent is much better than that agent.
Yeah.
I will not say names, but they still wanted to use that platform for collecting all of the cloud logs and all of the cloud events. So that's a situation that may happen. Within CADR, I do believe that the eBPF part, the EDR, ADR, KDR, whatever you want to call it, that's the biggest, I would say, value and the most technologically difficult problem to solve.
And that's where being native actually gives you an advantage versus I'm just going to read from my API call and hopefully I get the right data. Most of the time, you really care about real-time information as well, because you don't want to know the attack is happening right now, not 8 hours later.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's most of the technical questions I had. I've got 3 more fun questions for you.
Okay, fun is fun.
First one being, what do you spend most time on when you're not working on solving all the CADR problems of the world?
People who know me will know the answer. Surfing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm not a good surfer, but I like to surf. Okay, so it's fun. I always say, I don't know if I'm surfing, but I take a board and I go into the ocean and see what happens.
Oh, fair. Okay, just catch a few waves.
Yeah, and Israel is not big in waves. I do get a chance to travel here to the States a lot.
Oh, nice.
So I always stay like a day or two in Santa Cruz or in LA.
Do you actually fly with your board?
No.
I'm like, you're the guy with the extra large luggage.
I don't want to... It's going to sound that I have a board in every place. So I have a friend who lives in the valley.
Oh.
I bought a board and I keep it in his house.
Smart.
I
Okay.
take that, yeah.
And second question, what is something that you're proud of that is not on your social media?
First of all, I'm not big on social media. So almost everything I say is not going to be social media. But I would say I'm mostly proud, of course, of my family and my kids and the time I get to spend with them. And if I may be a little bit, I don't know, emotional, is my country, which is going through a very difficult period at this time. And I think we're managing a very difficult situation in relatively well.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult situation. I've got a third question as well. What's your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share with us?
So my favorite cuisine will be like a barbecue, like a smoked barbecue.
Oh, like a Texas style.
Like a Texas, whatever style. Yesterday I was here in Salt Lake City. Shout out to Pat's Barbecue.
Oh, okay.
It's really good. It was recommended by someone here local. Yeah. And it was really good.
All right.
And I also have a small fetish for Panda Express, which is...
Yeah, okay, fair. If you enjoy Panda Express, you enjoy Panda Express. Fair. People are secret admirers of it. They definitely don't like...
It's not good for you, for sure. But I call it like, because of all of the different flavors in sweet and sour sauce and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It plays with your minds in the right place.
Yeah, it definitely does. And where can people find you on the internet? Talk more about what the work that you guys are doing in ARMO.
So armosec.io is the website, but I always encourage people just reach out to me. Shauli, Shauli Rozen. Yeah. It's a very difficult name, but the plus side is it's the only Shauli Rozen in LinkedIn.
Really?
So,
you're the only Shauli Rozen in...
I think so, in LinkedIn. That will appear in your search.
Oh, okay, perfect. I'll still put the LinkedIn information description as well. But thank you so much for coming in, man.
Great to see you, man.
Great to see you as well.
Great discussion.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in and learning about CADR with us as well. I'll see you next episode. Thank you for listening or watching this episode of Cloud Security Podcast. We have been running for the past 5 years, so I'm sure we haven't covered everything cloud security yet. And if there's a particular cloud security topic that we can cover for you in an interview format on Cloud Security Podcast, or make a training video on tutorials on Cloud Security Bootcamp, definitely reach out to us on info@cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. By the way, if you're interested in AI and cybersecurity, as many cybersecurity leaders are, you might be interested in our sister AI Cybersecurity podcast, which I run with former CSO of Robinhood, Caleb Seamer, where we talk about everything AI and cybersecurity. How can organizations deal with cybersecurity on AI systems, AI platforms, whatever AI has to bring next as an evolution of ChatGPT and everything else continues. If you have any other suggestions, definitely drop them on info@cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. I'll drop that in the description and the show notes as well, so you can reach out to us easily. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode. Peace.